Gray. We start in Colombia, where legislators elected in March are beginning their 2018-2022 term in the Senate and the lower house. President Juan Manuel Santos, along with 108 senators and 172 lower house representatives, took part in the historic ceremony at the Capítulo Nacional, officially kicking off the ordinary sessions of the Congress. President Santos addressed this new Congress, calling it the most diverse in the country's history, and talking about the importance of members from the Revolutionary Alternative Forces of the Commons, or FARC, working together with the state for the first time after laying down their arms and bringing an end to the armed conflict.
Today, we witness a historic moment. We are installing the most diverse, the most inclusive, the most important Congress in 200 years. We have left behind a system that spoke only for the minority. This is now a pluralist, multicolor Congress. Many parties are represented, maintaining a balance between the right, the left, and the center. This is a show of good faith on our current democratic system. And most importantly, members of the Revolutionary Alternative Forces of the Commons are here for the first time, a party that was born out of the demobilization of the FARC armed forces. Many may not of Colombians are happy to see those who fought the state for over 50 years and that now are working under the law as every Colombian does.
We are joined now by Richard McCall. He's an independent journalist in Bogota to discuss this historic day in Colombian democracy. Richard, thanks for joining us. First of all, do you consider today a historic day? Do you think that this new pluralist government will be a game changer for Colombia?
Well, thank you. It's an interesting day, as always, in Colombian politics. Yes, the FARC, or the ex-FARC, FARC combatants now who've moved into politics, are in government. There's 5 of them, 5 of the former combatants in the Senate and 5 in Congress. And this is transcendental for Colombia. After so many years of war, these what were belligerent political actors have put down their arms and they're in Congress. How much they'll be able to change is up for debate. But yes, it's an interesting time. But when you look around at the faces in Congress and in the Senate, there's a lot of the similar faces that have been there over many terms before. So you've got a few changes, but as you saw in the elections and in the legislative elections, Colombia's politics has swung to the right. So how much can the FARC actually achieve within this political spectrum is up for debate.
Well, you said it was up for debate. So is it wrong for me to ask you how impactful you think they could be or they will be in this Senate, sorry?
Well, the impact is there. The very fact that they're there. I mean, this is a huge deal for Colombia. Hopefully this can go some way to changing the FARC's image in the eyes of the average Colombian. You know, there's a stigma surrounding the FARC due to so many 5 decades plus 5 decades of conflict. There is a stigma around them. So they'll be looking to change their image. They'll be looking to change their image in the minds of the people. But there's an interesting situation there. You have a firm opposition of 5 different parties, 6 different parties together who are in favor of peace. So they are going to be there with the FARC, and these, of course, will include the Alianza Verde, the Polo Democrático, and others. So there's a solid base.
And any predictions for an Iván Duque presidency, Richard?
Well, Iván Duque, he's put into some people into his, let's say, ministerial positions that raise some questions. There's a businessman in charge of defense. There's a Minister for Education who's been up for some certain, let's say, nefarious deeds when it comes down to food for children in parts of Bogota. There are some interesting calls there. He's got a lot to do. He's relatively inexperienced. We'll see how he can handle this.
Well, thanks for chatting with us, Richard McCall. We were speaking to an independent journalist in Colombia, Richard McCall.
Thank you.
The assassination of social leaders in Colombia continues. It's the first case of a murder in Boyacá. The victim was identified as Horacio Triana Parra, a former member of the Municipal Council and a former member of the Communal Action Board of La Vereda del Carmen in Neto. Parra was collecting bananas for his father. Was collecting bananas at his home when his father said he heard a gunshot. He investigated and he's found his son's body. Protests continue in Tegucigalpa, Honduras, over fuel prices. Our correspondent Gilda Silvestrucci brings us more.
It's the second day of protests by drivers that are trying to pressure the government to reduce the oil prices. More spots have been taken in Tegucigalpa and also more repression by the police and the army. The main roads in Tegucigalpa are blocked by taxis and buses. Citizens have also joined demonstrations to show their support. The prices of basic products have increased. There is no agreement between drivers and the government, yet different meetings are scheduled. But drivers already said they are not going to take any step back as the government offered a minimal discount on the oil prices. Prices that are damaging not only to drivers, but all Hondurans.
During mass protests all over the country, the citizens of Peru demanded a total reform of the political, social and justice systems. These protests started after a corruption scandal that has implicated many judges, politicians and businessmen.
The corruption scandals continue. They first reached the justice system and the National Council of Magistrates, and now the public ministry is involved as well. Pedro Chavarri, who was hours away from being sworn in as new Attorney General, can be heard talking to a judge about the possible dismissal of an official that made him uncomfortable. Chavarri said he'll still be sworn in despite the many complaints from social organizations and of some politicians who have positioned themselves against this. Tonight, Congress will analyze the possible removal of every member of the National Council of Magistrates as a first step to reform the whole national justice system, which is living one of its worst crises in history. Thousands of Peruvians took to the streets to protest against corruption. Their patience wore thin after phone recordings of judges negotiating sentences were leaked, including the case of a man who raped an 11-year-old girl.
They have always negotiated sentences, but the audios finally proved it, and we are fed up with the Peruvian political class that pays so much attention to other countries' issues, but not to ours.
The three powers of the state have been involved in corruption. They have manipulated sentences to benefit criminals.
Even as this scandal has forced the resignation of the president of the judicial power, the justice minister, and 3 members of the National Council of Magistrates, protesters think it's not enough.
There is a corruption network in the National Council of Magistrates. This is not only about removing the leaders, it's a matter of reorganizing the entire institution.
The goal of the protests is to remove everyone from power. According to social organizations, entrepreneurs and Congress members are also part of this mafia, which stems from the alliance between the Fujimorismo and the Aprista party, who have been manipulating the justice system for nearly 20 years.
The president has a chance to propose meaningful reforms in Congress, and if they are not constitutionally accepted, then he could reduce the deadline for congressional elections and shut down the parliament. The constitution must also be reformed. It was made to be as Alberto Fujimori wanted, and today his lackeys keep working the same way.
Social organizations have set dates for new protests that will coincide with Peru's Independence Day on July 28th. They believe that there is nothing to celebrate during this crisis.
que en medio de esta crisis no hay nada que celebrar.
Anti-IMF protests continue in Argentina. Our correspondent in Buenos Aires, Edgardo Esteban, tells us more.
Mobilizations in the streets of Buenos Aires reflect people's rejection towards the agreement made by the government and the International Monetary Fund. But people are also protesting the visit of the head of the IMF to attend the G20 meeting of economic and finance ministers. Citizens have been questioning the decision by Macri's government to sign a deal with the IMF that is harming the most vulnerable sectors of society and that is also worsening the current economic crisis. At this point, Argentina suffers from an inflation rate of over 30%, as well as a recession and daily layoffs. These mobilizations reject the IMF intervention in Argentina, as the loan means a long debt for the country.
We're going to take a short break now, but join us again after this look at what our multimedia colleagues are reporting.
זהו רגע מכונן בתולדות הציונות ובתולדות מדינת ישראל. הצעת חוק יסוד ישראל, מדינת הלאום של העם היהודי כנדרש בשלוש קריאות.
The nationality bill is a hate crime. They are totally discriminating against the Arab citizens, against the Arab minority, with racist articles, especially those of Jewish settlements, and those articles downgrading the status of the Arabic language.
Welcome back. In a story you will only see on Telesur, a special documentary looking at 25 years after the victims of ChevronTexaco's environmental disaster in the Ecuadorean Amazon filed a lawsuit demanding repatriations for its contamination. We're joined now by the team behind the documentary, A Cancer in the Amazon, producers Adriano Contreras and Ivan Castaneda. So, Adriana, let me start with you. What can we learn from this documentary that we may not have known about the Chevron disaster?
Well, Chevron operated here about 26 years, and in those 26 years, what they left behind was $16 billion of toxic wastewater that they dumped into rivers, as well as 900 pits of waste oil and waste mud that was used, that is a byproduct of the drilling of oil. So what this documentary is really about is to sort of bring back this case, which recently had a sort of small victory again with a reaffirmation of the $9.5 billion that Chevron Texaco, now part of Chevron, owes the victims here in Ecuador in terms of like reparations of rebuilding, cleaning, healthcare, cancer treatment, that kind of stuff. And this documentary sort of really dives into like the testimony. It's fully told by the people in the Ecuadorian Amazon who were completely affected by it.
So to talk to us, so let me speak to Ivan now. Why did you want to focus on this story, and like talk to me about how long it took you all to go into the area and film and that entire process?
Well, basically, we focus on this story because we like to tell like stories around where we are, and like personally, I'm really interested in climate change, in pollution, and things that has to do with struggles from Earth, from defending Earth. So that's why we pushed like together this project, and we went to the Amazon, and in the Amazon we spent like 3-4 days over there. We already have like good connections over there, so they help us like to do things really fast, actually. like going to the oil pits, talking with people with cancer, interviewing organizations that are there struggling. So, and I think the complete project was about like a month and a half from everything, the documentary, and also from the microsite that is over there in the internet now, in our webpage of Telesur English.
And Adriano, stories like these really have a happy ending. What does the future hold for Chevron's victims? Do you think they will ever get their compensation?
Well, that's the thing, we don't know, because in 2011, the Ecuadorian court ruled in favor of the victims, and Chevron appealed it. And last week, they lost their appeal, and the Ecuadorian court reaffirmed the money that's owed to them. Whether they will get their money is, it's up in the air, because Chevron is estimated to have already spent $2 billion on trying to victimize the victims, or placing blame on the victims for the disaster that they created 3 decades ago. And they're playing corporate evasion games, just like taking cases to all different countries to try to, avoid the responsibility that's
so
theirs.
Gentlemen, I absolutely cannot wait to watch this documentary myself. I've shared it on my Twitter account, but just for audiences, could you let them know where they can find your documentary and give them the address of your microsite?
Yes, you can find the documentary in our Facebook page. Is Facebook/Telesur English, and there is all the documentary, sorry. And then the microsite is also in our webpage, Telesur/English, and there you can find the complete project.
Thank you so much, Ivan and Adriano. I would invite all of you to take a look at that documentary. What is it?
A cancer
in the Amazon. I apologize.
No worries.
All right, so other news now. We're still in Ecuador, where members of the National Electoral Council have been dismissed. Ecuador's Transitory Council for Citizen Participation ordered the removal, claiming that members failed to comply with their duties. Our correspondent in Quito, Denise Herrera, has the details.
The Ecuadorian Temporary Council for Citizen Participation and Social Control voted unanimously to remove all officials of the National Electoral Council. The CNA members will have 3 days to present an official request to appeal the Council's decision.
In some cases, it is clear that resolutions made by the National Electoral Council were linked to the interest of the previous administration.
After the Council's resolution, the president of the CNN tweeted a statement rejecting the statement, calling it unconstitutional and illegal. The CNN vice president accepted the resolution.
As I have said before, I do not plan to make any sort of appeal, and I give myself over the Council's will.
Recent latest actions taken by the Temporary Council, including the removal of several authorities close to the former government, has some analysts calling the decision authoritarian.
This institution has served political maneuvering that seeks to dismantle what has been achieved and allow the return of former powers that control the state. It's evident that the Council has served a key role in dismantling a system that blocked these corrupt powers from being in control again.
The Temporary Council has also decided to remove the head of the Superintendency of Banks for allegedly not complying with his duties. During his defense hearing, the superintendent submitted evidence to prove that he had fulfilled all his obligations effectively and professionally. Denise Herrera, Telesur Quito, Ecuador.
In Venezuela, over 6,000 doctors graduated on Thursday in a massive event attended by President Nicolas Maduro. The number of doctors graduating from Venezuela's medical program actually increased despite the economic crisis. During his speech at the graduation, Maduro asked that authorities increase the number of community doctors by 100,000 for the year 2025 to cover the demand for doctors in the country and to provide assistance worldwide. In Argentina, social movement in the Jujuy province marched to remember the 1976 Ledesma blackout used by the dictatorship to kidnap political dissidents. Over 400 students, activists and trade unionists were kidnapped in a case that is yet to be fully investigated. According to social organizations carrying pictures of the victims, protesters say the role of the businessman Carlos Pedro Blaquier should be investigated further. Between July 20th and 27th, 1976, 400 people were kidnapped and tortured in the department of Ledesma. 36 of them were killed and disappeared.
Today, 42 years after the Ledesma blackout took place, we want to highlight the unfair arrest and imprisoning of Milagro Sala, who has been a key activist in denouncing events like the mass kidnapping and has urged for justice and for clarification in the level of responsibility of businessman Carlos Pedro Blaquier.
Trinidadian marijuana activist Nasma Mueller presented a petition to Prime Minister Dr. Keith Rowley in support of the legalization of marijuana. Prime Minister Rowley had told citizens last week that decriminalization was not a priority for Trinidad, which prompted anger amongst the population. During the encounter, the Prime Minister could be heard telling Ms. Mueller, "Let's not fight over this," as he invited her to a meeting with him and the Attorney General to address her concerns. At the CARICOM Heads of Government meeting earlier this month, the Marijuana Commission presented their report, which calls for the decriminalization of the drug.
It's a great day for Trinidad and Tobago. The Prime Minister has indicated that he is willing to have a conversation, that he's going to invite me to meet with him and the Attorney General and to discuss, for me, the legalization of cannabis. It is I think he recognizes it is a golden opportunity for us as a country and for him as a leader to leapfrog from the back and get to the front on this global cannabis industry to help people who are suffering from cancer, epilepsy, all sorts of diseases, chronic pain.
The government of Jamaica is extending an invitation to the 12 Thai boys and their coach who were rescued from a cave to an all-expenses-paid vacation to the island. Jamaica's Tourism Minister Edmund Bartlett said he couldn't think of a more appropriate gesture for the boys. He added that they will be using all diplomatic channels to make it happen as a show of appreciation for the special friendship Jamaica has with the people of Thailand over the years. Time now for another short break, but join us again after this look at what our multimedia colleagues are reporting.
Let's go. You can't make a citizen's arrest. But then you call the police on him. Let's go. Don't touch him. Why are you touching him?
I want to leave. Stop assaulting me. I want to leave.
Let's go. Let's go.
Welcome back. CARICOM High Commissioners in London met with the UK Home Secretary Shahid Javid for an update on Windrush matters, including the Windrush compensation scheme currently being designed. They were told that the 150-person Home Office Task Force fast-tracked 2,500 applications from victims of the Windrush scandal for citizenship or permanent residence. Some may also be eligible for compensation, and applications will be received online, by post or phone once the scheme has been implemented. But there are reports that the payouts will be capped to, quote, avoid any excessively high payments.
Hello, I'm Martin Ford and I'm the independent advisor designing the Windrush compensation scheme. You can help shape the scheme by taking part in this consultation. We want to hear from you in relation to 3 issues. Firstly, who should receive the compensation? Secondly, what losses should be compensated for? And thirdly, how the scheme should work. You can take part in the consultation at gov.uk/Windrush. Thank you.
We have been following the Pakistan elections. All signs point to a coalition government. Earlier, Carla Gonzalez spoke to Amir Javed, a political columnist based in Lahore.
Tell us who are the main contenders in these elections. Will there be a clear-cut a majority, or will there be a coalition government?
So there are two main parties currently competing in elections that are scheduled for Wednesday. The incumbent, Pakistan Muslim League Nawaz, who recently had their main leader and prime minister disqualified in a corruption scandal. And the opposition party, the Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf, which translates loosely to the Pakistan Movement for Justice, led by anti-corruption crusader and former sports star Imran Khan. And if you go by survey data and opinion polling, especially from the last 3 months, it seems that no one party will be able to command a majority in the election scheduled for Wednesday. And we are heading towards what is essentially going to be a hung parliament. And it looks increasingly like that the largest party in parliament will be from the opposition, the current opposition, Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf, and it is likely that they will end up leading the coalition government, after the elections take place.
So we hear a lot about the young Pashtun leader Mansour Pashtun. Tell us why he is making waves in the country.
So Mansour Pashtun is a very important recent political figure who's emerged on the political landscape in Pakistan, and part of the reason for his popularity is that he's taken on the historically powerful military establishment in Pakistan, and he's raised some important questions regarding the military's relationship with Islamist militants, especially in the border areas, in the Pashtun border areas between Pakistan and Afghanistan. And for a young Pashtun leader to openly challenge the military in Pakistan like this is largely unprecedented. And so he's grown in popularity. He's traveled the country despite heavy censorship and obviously, but the attempts by the military to stop him in various ways. He has still managed to gain considerable popularity, in different parts of the country.
So with all these issues going on and the international community looking on, are there expected to be any international observers to maintain an integrity during the vote?
So the European Union has deployed a 60-member team that will monitor the elections. There are a number of concerns that have already been raised about the fairness of the election process, given that the military has seemed to be siding with the opposition parties at this point. The European Union observers were not given visas to enter Pakistan till very recently, and they've made it very clear that these elections, there are certain irregularities that have already taken place. But it remains to be seen whether the polling day process itself, which is going to be on Wednesday, whether that's carried out in a free and fair manner. And everyone is waiting to see whether the reports that the European Union observers publish, whether they make a judgment call on whether the election was fair or not.
Thank you very much, Mayor.
And we've come to the end of this news brief. For these and many other stories, you can find them on our website at talisyourtv.net/English. And join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For Talisya English, I'm Sani Gray. Thank you so much for watching.
Quiero señalar frente a ustedes lo que es la moral de alguna prensa. Que no insistan, como insiste el Mercurio hoy día, en una actitud antinacional